Howdy, all you delicious people! I am here to review How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days. This movie feels very much like My Best Friend's Girl that has Dane Cook in it, or also this would be very similar to Failure to Launch, which has Matthew McConaughey in it. So, this movie has two bets going on at the same time, and for me, I just really like bet movies. It makes me go on and look at this movie, and I can see stuff like Freddie Prinze Jr., She's All That. I can look at 40 Days and 40 Nights with Josh Hartnett. I can look at and see that this movie is to feel just similar to Just One of the Guys that has the main character write this article and realize that nobody really cares about it. So she thinks that they don't care about it because of her gender, so she goes to this other school, writes the same article as a guy, and they still don't care about it. So she goes on to then realize that, well, how about I just go on and write about my experience about becoming a guy as the article, and that one works. But by the end of the story, it's revealed that she is a guy, and then has to reveal to the guy that she's been befriending throughout this film that yes, she is to be a woman, and flashes her body to this guy, but then also explains about how she does have feelings for him and how she does like him. And at that moment of time, he doesn't feel exactly the same way because he feels very betrayed by her, and his trust is to have been lost. And then all of a sudden, the girl goes on and does this article explaining how she does really have feelings for this guy and how she hated hurting him. And then the guy does read the article. It's like, hey, did you write this and have everything be true about it? Like, do you really feel that way about me? And the girl's like, well, yeah, I was being very honest about this article. And it's like, oh, well, how about we go on and how about we just kind of wipe the slate clean and the two of us go and write off to the sunset together and just go on this date? And the girl's like, oh, yeah, that'd be fine. That'd be great. So immediately I go on and I also look at this movie like I would look at the Matthew McConaughey movie, Two for the Money. That feels kind of similar to this in a way. Plus, also, we can probably look at the Mel Gibson movie, What Women Want, and find that that whole thing is like an advertising kind of movie. It kind of feels similar. But, anyways, so now, let's finally talk about how to lose a guy in 10 days after going on an all that big rant for 3 minutes. So, like I said, this is a two-bet movie going on simultaneously. What is this film about? Let me know in the comments below what is your favorite bet film, as well as also what could be your favorite rom-com. Or maybe also, maybe if you've ever yourself gone on to figure out how to strategize to lose a guy or girl within a very brief time because you realize that they weren't good for you, or whatever. It'd be an interesting conversational piece to start off with. So, for me to really get to know people. Anyways, so we go in to this story, and I want to cover Andy's bet first. So, Andy is to go on and realize that she is to be a how-to girl for this magazine, but she really wants to go on and wants to write something that's more important about politics. But she feels just kind of stuck in this rut. So Andy is to try to pitch this political piece to her boss, and it's met with, you're not going to write that. Put out a new article. Go on and do something that'll fit in the mold of what this magazine is to always put out. So, or go on and do a really good article, and then after that, I'm willing to kind of do anything within a very small parameter that you can still write about. But I'll say you can write anything, but I'll kind of lie to you. So Annie goes on to sides that since her friend Michelle is going through this recent dumping, and that Andy could go on and do a story about how to avoid kind of pitfalls of relationships and what could be the trigger thing to finally have a guy within 10 days to dump her, because Andy is to talk to Michelle, and Michelle's like, man, if anything, you can barf onto a guy, and the guy will still go on and say, yeah, do it again. Like, barf on me. So Andy is to try to figure out, like, okay, what could be the perfect thing to get this guy that I will attach myself with to be the last straw, so that way I can write this article within a certain time frame. So that is the bet going on for Andy, and now we have to talk about the bet for Ben. So Ben makes his way into his advertising agency, and so Ben is also in a rut himself. He is to go on and find out that, like, he mostly has been a guy that has been doing advertisements for beer and sports equipment because he's a guy, and he's really a guy in this film. I think he really. Anyways, so whatever. So Andy or Andy, Ben. We'll get to Andy a little bit later. Ben is to find out that there is a new contract for his advertising firm that's coming through that's to be of diamonds, and Ben finds out that women are getting that contract to pitch for diamonds, and Ben's like, I can sell freaking diamonds. Like, if I can sell all this other stuff, I think I can figure out how to sell diamonds to people. So when Ben finds out the women are doing this pitch, Ben crashes this bar meeting, and it's to pitch that he can sell these diamonds as good as these women can. And Ben tries to go on and does his first pitch that diamonds are for everyone. And at first, Philip is to like this idea, but then the girls realize how it actually goes on and makes the diamonds less rare, so it's kind of just a bad pitch. So the girls start talking about how diamonds are like falling in love, or it's like a relationship. And Ben goes on to be like, well, like, I can probably take this whole relationship idea and figure out a way that I can get this diamond contract. So Ben goes on to say that he will go on and find any random girl in this bar, meet up with them, and date them and have them fall in love with him. And Philip is to go on and be like, okay, like, I'll go on and I'll have you take on that bet. And if you get this girl to fall in love with you, then I'll be willing to have you go on and do this pitch and this contract, because if anything, um, you'll have earned my trust. So Ben has the girls go on and point out a girl to him, and it ends up being none other than Andy, because the girls know that Andy's doing this article because they were at the magazine company ahead of time finding out what Andy's article is, and so they're going to use that against Ben. So Ben goes on and meets up with Andy, and they start asking these brief questions, which leads them to going on and getting something to eat with it, which there's to even be times where Andy is trying to find out or figure out more about Ben and start to get really interested in him. We feel that. And so as already things are going well in this relationship, to where Andy's leaving subtle hints that she is to be a Knicks fan with these Knicks tickets that were kept in her purse, and Andy is to find, or Andy, Ben is to find these tickets and be like, oh, well, like she's a Knicks fan. Oh, I can get a date out of this then. So the two of them go on to this Knicks game, and so Andy figures out a way within the game to start to get Ben to be annoyed. So after that, Ben is to seemingly be fine with it and continues on the relationship of like, oh yeah, you want to meet up tomorrow? And Andy's like, really? Like, after what I did to this guy? Like, he's just fine with it? Huh, that's just weird. So Andy decides that she's gonna just strive to just become more and more annoying, to where she has all these baby talks, to where she goes on to completely adjust this guy's whole entire apartment to look more feminine, to have feminine products in his medicine cabinet, to have this girl just go on and be able to take uh, these keys of this guy's place without him knowing, and just come on in on this boys' night and interrupt his poker game and do everything to not only annoy Andy, but then also annoy the boys that he's with. So Ben eventually points out to Andy how psycho and crazy that she is more and more becoming, because it's very unlike her from the very first time they met. And Ben is to go on and need to figure out a way to try to keep this relationship alive for X number of days. So eventually he's to be given the advice of couple therapy, and so Ben takes it as like, okay, like I'll go through couple therapy. So but also it's kind of weird that they're already going so quickly through couples therapy when they've only been together for a short number of days. So Ben suggests couples therapy to Andy, and Andy's like, well, yeah, I can go on and know the perfect person to send us to. And Andy goes on and sends the two of them to none other than Michelle, who's not a therapist. Uh, and also, uh, Michelle is to kind of take the side of Andy anyways, but then also there's certain times where Michelle is going on and kind of flirting a little bit with Ben, and there's we had points where it's like Ben is complaining to Andy. It's like, well, hey, you said I'm gay, but then all of a sudden I'm flirting with this girl. Make up your mind. So the further along that this movie goes on, Ben is to bring Andy uh, to meet up with his family, which gets them even closer. Andy was just so happy that Ben's mother had hugged him, treated Andy very much like she's one of the family. And at some point, again, Andy drops the crazy, and both Ben and Andy have this intimate moment in the bathroom where they're kissing and the hugging, and so I think also Andy, the reason why she's starting to really fall for Ben is that his willingness to keep this relationship alive, regardless of how many wrenches she's throwing into this, like she's starting to go on and really respect Ben a lot more for putting up with this. Um and and going on and figuring out a way to continue on this whole torture. So by the end of all this, we push to this party because Ben goes on and turns to Annie and explains, yeah, I have this party that my boss is throwing, so I want you to come with me as my girlfriend. And Annie's like, oh, you want me as your girlfriend? So also we have that card game that I think was just like, okay, like the card game only pushes to be by the end of the film where they have to go through the whole bullshit thing over again. And how Ben is really good at reading people, or Annie says that she's really good at reading people. But anyways, so it's funny how they both say that they're really good at reading people, but then they don't really read. Neither one of them having a bet. Plus, I'm also curious which bet is worse. Ben's bet is to actually be a good thing, even though he's kind of pretending that he's not being annoyed by this girl. And yes, like him going on and having this girl fall in love with him is to somehow profit with his job. But here's the thing, for Andy, she's doing this whole relationship just to write an article, and she's going to publicize it to where everyone can see what Andy had done to this guy. So isn't that a lot worse when you think about it? Like, she's not only torturing him on purpose, but then she, on top of that, is showing it to all for all the world to see. Ben goes on and wins this bet. There's only a very select few that even know that it's going on. But Andy is publicly showing this to the world of like, hey, look at the horrible things that I did to this guy. I forced him through a Celine Dion concert and did all these things, and eventually he still stuck around. So now we get to the party, and at the party, both of Ben and Andy's boss are there, as well as also the two girls that want to throw a wrench into what Ben is doing, is going to figure out a way to trick Andy into wanting to dump Ben. But also, Ben is to come to find out from Laura about the whole How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days article. And then Laura is to be mortified by, like, oh my god, you're the guy. You're the guy who got the penis nickname. So, as Andy and Ben are to both feel hurt by one another, they decide to lash out at one another on a public stage as they go on and they sing their rendition of You're So Vain. And we have quite a bit of time where Ben is going on and improvising because, yeah, he's in advertisement sales, so I guess he can really go on and kind of think on the fly. And go on and throw out the whole like you made me miss the big game and all these other things, and Andy's like, oh, you can rhyme really well, can't you? So they argue through song, and they eventually are to be very upset with one another for putting this whole bet together. But again, Ben's bet isn't as worse as Andy's is. And plus, I don't really even think that Ben's bet is to immediately have him profit off of anything. Andy goes on and is to put together an article which he immediately profits off of. Ben goes on and gets his contract, and there's no surefire thing that he's going to go on and even be successful at that. So with the whole Frost Yourself campaign. But so after finally Ben is to get the contract anyways, and is to find out about this whole bet and how Andy's also upset with Ben for doing almost the identical thing that she was doing. Ben finally does go on and be like, well, if your whole article is about how you can lose a guy in 10 days, you've accomplished it, so I'm breaking up with you, goodbye, and then Ben leaves. So after Ben is to take some time away from Andy, the heart grows fonder. And then Ben is to come to find out that Andy is to be leaving to go to Washington. She's running away. And so Ben starts to chase after her and is to have read her article and is to find out how she really felt about him because he was avoiding the article, but then he finally decides to read it and confronts Andy about it. It's like, hey, everything that you put in this article, it's not just something that you just wrote um, to make yourself look good. And Andy's like, well, no, I really was to be very truthful in that article. So Ben goes on and asks Andy, like, hey, where are you going? And she's like, well, I'm going to Washington. I'm going to write there because if anything, I can't write uh, where I'm writing currently and get the stories that I want. And Ben goes on to say, like, hey, you can write anywhere. Yeah. Right after COVID, yeah, that definitely is really true. You can go on and kind of write from your home. Um, you can be a novelist at your home. You can go on and do YouTube videos in your own home. Um, yeah, there is a crux of number of things that are all available to everybody. So Ben is to cement to Andy that he really does like her and he wants their relationship to keep going. So hoping that this time around he's going to be dealing with a less crazed uh, Andy because she no longer is doing this whole weird, goofy bet thing, and she's going to finally be herself instead of some crazy version of herself. So by the end, Ben gives this taxi driver some money to deliver back Andy's stuff because Andy's staying. The two of them kiss and hug it out by the end of all this, and that's what is to kind of end this tale. Uh, Also, like the kind of fun bits of the story was also like the card game with the family. The even though it was just common, like I'm really watching people play cards, really. Also, there was a bit of fun with Ben trying to teach Andy how to use the motorcycle and him going flying off of it and then him jumping back onto it to help her figure out how to ride this motorcycle because, of course, she's never ridden it before. Um, yeah, all of that was just a lot of fun to watch. But also, I wish Andy could have figured out a way to keep driving more wedges and come up with more things to escalate things because when I've gone on to watch a number of like Romancing of the Stones and all these kind of relationship escalating things where eventually it finally gets to a point to where it almost gets to extremes for almost people's lives are almost at risk. Like you would almost think that maybe Andy would probably figure out maybe some allergy that maybe Ben had or something like that. But because I've seen that in other films where the other person goes on and realizes somebody has a nut allergy, so they put like nuts in there, and then they realize, oh my god, I almost killed this person, and then they realize like how far they went, and so they then reveal to like, oh man, yeah, I really almost killed you. So But yeah, that also just makes for rather interesting films to see the escalation. But it kind of feels like at some point that Andy gets to a certain point and then just kind of gives up. And also is to turn to Laura and like, yeah, I can't write this article because if anything, like I'm failing at what I'm doing. But Laura's like, well, just write the article anyways. Like whatever you're doing is just entertaining enough to garner an article, so just write the article anyways. Because Laura just says, hey, if your computer's not broken, you can write this article. So at that point, also, I can understand why Andy was to kind of give up on the whole article thing because it doesn't matter what she writes about, but also it just matters that she only has these restrictions on her. So, yeah, so for Andy going on and finally deciding to do whatever she wants and running off to Washington to finally do what she's always dreamed, and Ben going on by the end of this and getting to a different contract that has things more challenging for him, makes it all just more interesting to see how this movie all plays out. So with that said, with that all playing out, I think it's about that time to get more into the nitty gritty details about this film and go in for piece, blow for blow, scene for scene. Because I think it's about that time yet again to, of course, go into spoiler time, about that time we get spoil. How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days. So, with that said, let me know in the comments what would be your favorite rom com. I know that honestly, me doing a rom com probably is not exactly a thing that everybody wanted me to do within this channel because I can kind of feel that. But if anything, I'm going on and probably either putting this as an extra thing, uh, plus also like I don't know, the universe was kind of telling me to kind of review this movie, so hopefully there's a reason for me going on and covering this. Like I had just gone on to recently listen to an interview that Matthew McConaughey did talking about this film, as well as also recently, before even watching that interview, Mama had gone on to kind of have this on, and I was just watching it casually in the background. So it's just kind of, you know what, like, I think the universe is just weirdly telling me that I need to just watch and talk about this film and see where that takes me. So, with that said, let's get into the nitty gritty details because it's about that time. So, we first start off with the Composure magazine that is being showed so early. So, Andy is to be doing like these upside down chin ups with her feet hanging on the chin up bar, and all of a sudden there's this magazine that pops up that says how to get a better body in 5 days. Andy goes on to adjust her room, and shortly thereafter that does a article about how to feng shui your apartment. Yeah, remember feng shui when people gave a shit about that? Man, was that really a fad. Some people probably won't even know what feng shui is anymore. Um, like, I think it's kind of funny how we have to care how a piece of furniture could be placed in some room somewhere that could probably make us feel better about our lives. Kind of like how we probably go on and get certain memorabilias or certain collectibles or certain things that make us kind of feel better about our lives because we have certain things in our rooms, and like it kind of gets to the point where I would go on and talk about the quote from Fight Club: "The things that you own end up owning you." Um, that if anything, you should figure out ways to become more free. Um, but anyways, let's cut back to this film. So we then have Andy that is being pulled over by a cop car, and so Andy is to go on and do this whole how-to of how to try to avoid getting parking tickets. by having to go on and figure out ways of talking to cops that eventually will get her to not get parking tickets, to see what works, what doesn't work, and do that all as a magazine article. So, if anything, Annie could have just gone on and just could have talked to a police officer and see what answers that she could have gotten them instead of actually going on and having to almost get to a point where she could or could not be getting tickets. It seems a little bit strange. But so now here is where Andy is doing this political piece that she's talking about with Janine. And Janine is like, well, yeah, this is a really good political piece, but sadly enough, this magazine will not go on and do anything about it. And Andy's like, well, yeah, like, man, I really was to go on and get, like, masters in journalism, and if anything, I'm just kind of stuck doing these how-to articles, and this just kind of sucks. And so Janine is like, well, hey, don't give up. Like, just keep trying. So Janine goes on and brings up the fact that Andy has been schmoozing uh, this Sports Illustrated editor, and so the Sports Illustrated editor had gone on to send Andy some tickets for a Knicks game, and that's where the Knicks game all kind of gets kind of wrapped up in this film. So all of a sudden, this one girl comes in to explain to the girls that they have a staff meeting in 30 minutes. So Andy ends up asking Janine, it's like, well, hey, have you seen Michelle? I haven't seen her all morning. And so Andy tells Janine that she'll be going on and retrieving Michelle, and if anything, just kind of go on and scramble coffee, and eventually they'll get to the meeting. So now we cut to a girl named uh, Spears. So Spears is going on and buying one of the Composure magazines, and she's walking through the streets with it. As also, we come to find that Ben is motorcycling his way through the streets and is like cutting through everything and then just kind of parking wherever. So as Ben goes on and meets up with Spears, Spears is talking about the Composure article and how it's a fastly growing magazine that's to be the biggest in the country. So, and if anything, also that they're going to be tying in a new campaign with this magazine, and so Ben goes on and also, besides meeting up with Spears, he then turns and sees a girl named Benny, and it's like, oh yeah, well, like the two of you are going to go on and working on this new campaign together. Oh, good for you. So now we make our way back to Andy. Andy goes on and is to meet up with Michelle, and Andy speaks to Michelle, and it seems that Andy has nothing to live for, and uh, and so Michelle goes on and mentions about how she was dating a guy for a week, and it was the best week of her life, and eventually she'll go more in depth about the relationship. So then we cut back to Ben. Ben is making his way into this advertising agency where he's speaking to his friends that are both Thayer and also to be Tony. So Some of these smaller characters I didn't really care to memorize the name of. That's very evident compared to some other times where I'm just rattling off these names so easily. Like, I didn't really look at the cast list before going into this. I probably should have, but oh well. Um, like, most of this movie has to be mostly with Andy or Ben, anyways, and then all these kind of smaller characters are kind of more briefly there from time to time. So so here's where Ben finds out from Tony and Thayer about the whole diamond contract. And as Ben makes his way into this office, he takes off this t shirt and swaps it for this more dress shirt. And while he's doing it, all the women are just stopping, like, taking a good look at Ben. Uh, and so we now cut to Michelle that's with Andy getting out of this cab. So Michelle starts to talk about her relationship, on how she was to go on, and after a few days of being with this guy, she says 5 and then she lies about that, and it's actually just 2. That the two of them had sex together, and she cried during sex, and they were kind of questioning whether or not she should have cried during sex. And she's like, "Oh no, yeah, like I really felt strongly about it." But after that, it seems that the guy just was to be busy with work, didn't really pay her much attention, and just felt like she was being dumped after that. Maybe there was just a thing of this guy just being busy. Maybe the guy really wasn't sure about the relationship with her crying the way she did. Um, Maybe there was just some kind of miscommunication going on there. I don't know. Maybe she could have gone on and called the guy and really could have been more sure about things. But, anyways, so Michelle writes it off as maybe she was fat, and eventually, the more that Michelle talks to Andy, Michelle goes on to say how Andy is to probably be able to kind of get away with anything in a relationship. That she can go on and barf on a guy, and the guy will be like, "Yeah, barf on me more. Yeah, all right." And he's like, "No, I don't think I can get away with anything." And if anything, I've been dumped too in the past. So now we get in the meeting room. So we'd have Laura that goes on and turns to Lori, and we'd have this girl that goes on and she's doing all these articles about, yeah, Botox for beginners, and all these like extreme scary articles about all these surgeries and all these things. And at the end of every single one of them, she's like, yeah, these really horrible stories, but all of a sudden, every single one of them are all to be upbeat. And by the end of it, the more and more that she says that, eventually the girls start chiming in. It's like, yeah, I'm sure she's going to say upbeat. And then she does, like, oh, yeah, figures. So after that, Laura goes on and it's like, okay, Andy, what do you have for me? And she starts to talk about a political piece, and Laura kind of shuts off. It's like, no, like if anything, Andy, you work for Composure magazine. If anything, if you have a really hugely successful article, you can write whatever you want. But until that day comes, you're writing what I want you to write. So if anything, yeah, go on and only write within this parameter of these certain things. So if anything, your political idea is dead. So Laura goes on and all of a sudden turns to Michelle, and and they turn to her because it's like, well, hey, like, uh like I think they asked like why that they were late today or something like that. And so Michelle was to go on and say, like, well, yeah, like I was to go on and just be dumped the night before. So if anything, it was just hard for me to want to come into work today. And Laura goes on and is to try to like, hey girls, like try to like rally with her, like tell her how great that she looks today. About her eyes look so fierce because the outfit that she's wearing, because Andy picked it out. So so Laura asks Michelle if this is something that she's willing to write about, and then starts to ask if other people want to write her story for her. And Lori is going to like, oh, I'll write about how upbeat it is, how the misery of her breakup has really just really hurt her. But if anything, it's going to be really upbeat, right? Surprisingly. Anyways, so but here is where Andy comes up with the pitch of like, well, wait a minute, like I can probably go on and I could probably do something that. And so Annie starts to riff. She just goes on and just starts to improvise this whole pitch. Let me go on it. Let me back this up a little bit. So Annie decides that she's going to do this whole story about the whole like dating, but trying to do all the pitfalls to avoid getting broken up by a guy, and figure out how to basically torture a guy to the point to where he finally is to have a one last straw of like, nope, like this will definitely be the thing that quickly breaks things off with this girl. And honestly, like with this idea, I just don't quite get it because you're really relying on the fact that this girl is going to get a guy that their relationship will last a number of days. I have gone on to have so many interactions that would either last one night or go on and last a couple of days, but then eventually it just gets tiring because really it's just kind of go on and be just these kind of conversations that don't really go anywhere at certain points. Um, or it's to just be just kind of these just consistent back and forth like things that again still just kind of go nowhere sadly. Uh, so yeah, so it's quite interesting how like something like this could be just like, oh yeah, this girl is going to definitely officially date this guy uh, and have this really go the distance, which technically that does happen, but still. Uh, uh, plus, also like this girl should have probably gone on and dated multiple guys uh, and really tried different tactics and different strategies. And she only went on to date one guy. So, like, I don't know. Maybe it would have been way more interesting in the article if she was dating multiple guys at once and doing all these different strategies. But so, Laura has to tell Andy that she needs to now find this guy to try this experiment on, and they all head out. So, as they head out, they meet up with Spears and Benny, and so as Laura meets up with these two girls, they then talk about Andy, talk about how she's writing this article, and Benny and Spears calls this like salacious and like, ooh, wow, like this is a really good story. Can't wait to read it. Because it seems that they are readers of this magazine, which is really cool. Um, that they kind of connect it all. So now Michelle, Janine, and Andy go out to the club or this bar to go on and inevitably have Andy meet up with Ben. So, uh, So as they're making their way to this location, they're talking about how Andy will probably go to extremes like burning down the guy's house, um, or doing any number of things to quickly kill the relationship. And Andy's like, no, I think I'll do things within reason to just be like the common things that every girl does to try to get rid of a guy. And also, like in the Dave Cook movie, My Best Friend's Girl, like it's very interesting how he goes on and how he uses this like really loud music in the car that is to kind of be probably offensive to the girl, but then all of a sudden Kate Hudson's character comes in. It's like, oh yeah, I love this song. So it's kind of funny in the Best Friend Girl movie where Dane Cook tries everything to have this girl hate him, and she loves everything that he does, and even to where he's being such a dick, and the girl actually likes that, and then in turn, like Dane Cook, by one part of this movie, gives a kid advice about dating. Anyways, so it's quite an interesting film. If you've never checked it out, I would recommend people just seeing it, because if you like this movie, you'll like that film also. But anyways, so here is where Ben kind of bar crashes this whole meeting, and he's there before the girls are with Philip. So Philip is to say to Ben that they want to put their best foot forward on this pitch and realize that these girls are best fitted for the job. And Ben is like, well, you know what? I can understand that, but like, if anything, like diamonds do have a target audience of men. Like, look at football players. Like, look at any number uh, of athletes. Like, they all have diamonds also, whether they're men, whether they're women. If anything, uh, diamonds are for everyone. And Philip likes that pitch, but then eventually Spears kind of writes it off as like, well, diamonds need to be more rare, and if diamonds are just for everybody, then everyone can afford them, and that just makes also diamonds just sound cheap. So it makes them lose their status. So as Benny starts talking about how uh, selling a diamond to a woman is like making her fall in love, and how having a diamond could make her feel giddy or desirous or adventurous or desperate. And as they start to take a look around the room, Ben goes on and takes a look around the room himself and says, like, well, hey, like, if needing diamonds is like falling in love and lust is probably like chocolates, then if anything, uh, like I think it's time for Ben to go on and start saying how he wants to try and sell himself on a random woman anywhere at any time that could go on and justify that he's the better man for this pitch. So Philip wants Ben to prove and put his money where his mouth is to say that he can go on and sell himself to any woman, any place at any time. So Ben goes on and lets the girls decide what woman he's going to choose. And so as the girls start to look around, there's one girl by the bar that is wearing a leopard print. And there's also be a woman that they call Babylon 5. Uh, and so Ben goes on and says, "Be nice, ladies, be nice." And it has to be a single woman. It can't just be some girl that's married off or whatever. Yeah, you have to kind of go on and be more specific, more selective. So here is where Spears goes on and points out the girl in the gray, who is to be Andy. And so Ben is like, all right. So, all right. God, yeah, you can't go one Matthew McConaughey movie without saying some kind of weird quote that he's always ever said. Even though he doesn't say that in every one of his movies, it still has to be like a thing that he goes on and he just knee jerkingly says. So, as Ben is having his eye on Andy, Andy is having her eye on a guy that's next to a green shirt that normally she wouldn't go on and she wouldn't try to get with, but she's like, maybe for this whole magazine thing, I'm going to try to end up seeing if this guy will be the perfect fit for my article. So Annie makes her way over, and so as Ben goes on to talk about this diamond pitch being his, and goes on to I think give a toast that he's going to land this diamond deal. We then have Andy making her way to this random bit of guy, and she starts talking about New York. And the guy is like, well, yeah, I really do love New York. Like, I've spent a lot of time with my wife in New York. And then this guy ends up kind of saying, like, well, yeah, I'm married. I'm sorry. Like, I hate to break it to you. So Andy then walks off and is like, yeah, this guy was married. So Andy then meets up with Ben. They start briefly talking, and Ben asks if Andy is hungry, and she says starving. He's like, okay, all right, we'll go to this place. So Annie goes on meets up with Michelle and Janine and explains how she picked up a guy, and they say it's like, oh, the guy that was at the bar, and she's like, oh no, that guy was married. I'm gonna go and find a completely different guy and get with him. So Andy is to point out who the guy is. The girls look at the guy. It's like, oh man, this guy's really attractive. This guy's really cute. So Andy goes outside to follow Andy to his vehicle, or follow Ben to his. Man, I'm getting names confused. I know this is going to happen. So Andy follows Ben out to his vehicle. She realizes that his vehicle is a motorcycle, and Ben tosses to Andy this helmet and calls it a goofy one. So Annie puts on the helmet and Ben puts the strap on, and there's kind of this funny bit of thing here that comes back where Ben says, "Hey, you're going to enjoy your ride." And then Andy in turn says, "Are you going to enjoy your ride?" Because if you think about it, um, there's like a whole different ways to kind of dissect that. Like, if anything, both of them being on the bet are like, yeah, they're both gonna enjoy doing what they're doing here. Uh, but also Annie's like, well, hey, you're gonna enjoy your ride because I'm gonna be effing with you the whole time. So the two of them make their way to what looks like a lobster joint, and so Annie decides that she's gonna start asking Ben questions like, okay, you get three questions. Questions three. So Andy asks what Ben does for a living. He says for advertisement, he's currently going on and mostly covering alcoholic beverages or athletic equipment. but he's going to soon land a diamonds deal or jewelry deal. And so Andy goes to this joke of saving the world one keg party at a time, and Ben is like, well, yeah, something like that. So Ben, of course, goes on and echoes what uh what Annie had just asked him. Is like, well, what do you do? So Annie goes on mentioning about how she is to work at this magazine. She's an article writer, and eventually it's a lot of how tos, and it's a fashion magazine, and eventually she says what the magazine is, and he's like, oh, like I went on and found out that this is like the biggest growing magazine in the country, so good for you, but also you're saving the world one shopaholic at a time. So, and Andy's like, well, touche, like, all right. So if anything, Ben goes on and is to kind of make fun of Andy because she's not doing a real serious job. That if anything, she has masters in journalism, but if anything, she's going on to do these stories that, if anything, are to be under, like, oh, she could do articles about shoes. Ooh, she could do articles about um, what to wear, like what's the latest trends, and all this other stuff. So, and when Ben says that, Andy kind of throws it back at him. It's like, well, hey, like, I guess I'm not going to be able to go on and do alcoholic beverages or athletic gear because someone else has that market covered. So, so Andy's last question is: it all fair in love and war? And and Ben says it's true, and it's a great answer and a great question. So now they make their way back to Ben's place, and Andy goes into Ben's bathroom, looks at the medicine cabinet, and is now calling Michelle. Michelle say to Andy, it's like, oh man, the first night you've already got into his bedroom? All right. Man, you a quick worker. And so Andy's like, well, yeah, I'm going to practice some self control. So in the background, we have Ben that is blazing up the Nelly song, It's Getting Hot in Here. But then eventually he changes, I think, to a more classical song. And he lit the candles, but then he blows out the candles because, again, like, he's not really trying to put pressure on this girl or expecting her to put out. So Ben makes his way to the bedroom, and as Andy lands onto the bed, she pats the bed to have Ben come over. Ben goes on, makes his way to the dresser or his this table or whatever it is. He goes on and taps on the table for her to come over, and so Andy does go on and does so. So they start making out, but then Andy realizes that this is a bit of a mistake. Maybe they're going a little too fast, but also Ben is saying the same things. So, but all of a sudden they end up on the bed together because they keep making out with one another. And then so eventually they keep realizing that they're going too fast. It's like, well, hey, I respect you. I respect that you respect me. I respect this. So as Andy leaves for the night and then turns to Ben before she leaves to say her goodbyes, Ben goes on and says that this girl's going to fall madly in love with him. And Andy says that this girl, or Andy says that Ben will wish that he was dead. So now we come to find that Andy had purposely left her purse in Ben's place. So Ben brings Andy's purse into his office, and now him and his friends are questioning whether or not they should look into the purse or not to kind of scope out what kind of woman she is. So Thayer goes on and tells Ben that all they need to do is knock down the purse and say that they had to clean it up. So they do so. They knock it all down and they start combing through the purse and they find the Knicks tickets. And so Ben goes on to call Andy after a number of flowers all arrive, and Michelle reads the cards and it's coming from Ben. So Andy explains to her friends, is like, oh, he found the Knicks tickets. So Ben calls Andy and is to mention about, oh yeah, I did go through your purse because it accidentally fell because my friend is such a klutz. Oh, tell her how klutzy you are. Yeah, I'm such a klutz. Oh, I'm sorry. So Ben is to talk about the Knicks tickets, but also explains to Andy that there's a reason why she left that purse, and there's a reason why she probably wanted him to even find the Knicks tickets, because she wants to go to this Knicks game with him, and so they might as well go onto this game. So Andy will go on and have this be their next date, and eventually she'll figure out a way to ruin it. So they're at the Knicks game, they're going on, they're screaming, they're yelling about all the details of this game, and at some point there's a kiss cam that comes up. They go on, they point, and they kiss, and they have a bit of fun here. So as the later this game is going on and how it's almost over, we have Andy that's drinking a thing of her drink, and it's like, okay, how can I start messing with this guy? So Andy comes up with the idea that right before the game is to be ending, that she's going to have Ben go out to get a drink. So, because she's so thirsty. So, Annie explains about how she's very thirsty and how she wants this drink, no ice. And so Annie runs off to get this drink and has this very specific way of remembering, okay, a small drink, no ice, and it's this soda. So Ben goes on, rushes to the concession stands, tries to get this drink, and the guy is just like, hey man, if you just spend a quarter more, you can get a jumbo size. And the guy's like, I don't care about that. I just want the small size. Give me this drink. So Ben rushes back to Andy to catch the rest of the game, and then all of a sudden, Andy realizes that the drink is not diet. How would she even go on and notice that? But also, like, I guess she didn't go on and tell him she wanted a diet, so she did that on purpose. So Annie then goes on to rush back to the concession stand, but sees on the TV the scoring of the game, and so he's so happy about it. So everybody is starting to leave the game, and he's forced to have now watched most of the ending of the game on this television instead of actually physically in the stands. Honestly, whenever I was to have gone on and been like at a wrestling event, like I would have to physically have binoculars to see what the heck is going on. Um, so yeah, like in all honesty, I feel like it was a lot better off to watch it on TV than it was actually in person, anyways, unless you're in like the front row. But even that, I'm just like, I would still feel like it just kind of depends on what the event is. Like if it's a band concert, definitely don't be in the front row of that. Definitely go on and be like probably at more of the further end because oh my god. Um, yeah, eventually I really just for a certain number of days kind of lost my hearing, and then I had to kind of regain it back with that experience. I wasn't aware of that at all. Now if I ever go to a band concert again or a music concert, I know ahead of time. But anyways, so uh, so Andy is to rub it in consistently that Ben was to miss the last bits of that game, and so Ben has Andy go into this taxi, and they say goodnight to one another, and now Ben is in this pitch meeting, and all of a sudden the secretary is going on to explain to Ben that he has a phone call. So Ben takes this personal phone call, and it's coming from none other than Andy. And Philip is looking at Ben. It's like, wrap this thing up. Ben comes to find that this call is coming from Andy, and Andy wants to set up a following date. Ben goes on to say, it's like, well, yeah, how about we go on and how about we have a movie night? You pick the movie, we'll go and we'll go to it. So Andy is to pick none other than a chick flick, and it ends up being Sleepless in Seattle, which Ben surprisingly actually does really like that film and goes along uh, with Andy to go to this movie. So, excuse me. Uh, so the two of them make their way to Sleepless in Seattle, and as they're talking about the film, at some point Andy goes on and turns to Ben and asks, like, what are you thinking about right now? And Ben is like, what are you talking about? I'm thinking about the movie. And Andy's like, are you not thinking about Meg Ryan right now? And Ben is like, no, the only thing I'm thinking about is how beautiful you look right now, because I'm looking straight at you. And all of a sudden, there's to be this guy that's starting to get more annoyed by how much they're talking throughout the film. And then also, at some point, Andy goes on and starts kissing on Ben, and the guy is getting annoyed for how they're kind of they're blocking his point of view. So finally, like this guy gets more and more annoyed for how noisy they are, for how they're distracting him from this movie, and they're ruining his enjoyment of it. So and also how the uh the moviegoer guy goes on to start arguing and yelling at the girl. So they go out of the theater room to have this fight. So, if anything, Andy and Ben aren't really sure if they should fight this guy or not for how huge he is. So, the guy goes on and slugs Ben in the face and knocks him down. And the moviegoer guy is like, oh, good, now I can enjoy my movie in quiet silence. And then he leaves. So, Ben ends up getting comforted by Andy as his face is in her chest. And so Ben takes full advantage of this and is to just thrust his face inside of her pillows, her chest. You know what I mean? So all of a sudden, Andy is to start to realize that Ben is taking full advantage of just getting uh a good old feel, if you know what I mean. So Andy is to say that Ben is fine, and then we cut to a shiner that Ben has the following day. So Thayer asks Ben if it was worth it, and Ben says like, well, yeah, taking the punch fucking sucked, but if anything, the comfort afterwards was very nice. So uh, at some point, there mentions the Florence Nightingale syndrome, and so the next thing they talk about, what is Ben's next plan? Ben's next plan is to go on and make a dinner date so he can also watch the Knicks, and for him to cook for her to kind of show that he can cook. So Andy and Janine are talking here, and Andy is starting to get much more won over by Ben. And it's getting to the point to where they're thinking it's like, oh no, you're not going to date him, you're just going to adopt him. So Laura comes in and is to be very interested in Ari, the bit of journal stuff that Andy has been writing in for this article so far. And also, Laura goes on to say to Andy, hey, if you're going to go on and if you're going to have a, a dinner date with him, maybe you should take less bites. I thought that was kind of funny. So now we cut to the dinner date, and Andy has a box of stuff. Here where she brings in the fern and a bunch of teddy bears that she like puts all over the beds and such. So Ben is very distracted with making this huge like I want to say it's like a pot roast or something like that. It's a very huge meaty meal. So Ben is to go on and really get really deep into getting this whole meal put together. And the funny thing of it is Ben honestly should have asked Andy if there was any like allergies she had or any like food things that like she doesn't eat, so he could go on and make a meal of that. Or Andy could have gone on and asked what exactly he was making, so that way she could have had a thing to stop him from making this meal. But I guess him taking so much time to make this meal for her to go on and just have a problem with it, I guess could go on and make Andy just very frustrated. So Andy comes to find that, or Ben comes to find that Andy started to add stuff around the room, and so Ben starts to comment on it, and then uh, Andy is to give Ben this fern and says how it's a love fern, and if the plant grows, then their love will grow. So let me go on and let me pause here for a second. So after Ben has been preparing this whole meal, shows it to Andy. Andy explains how she's a vegetarian and she can't eat meat. So they make their way to a restaurant or a place that goes on and only has uh like vegan like food. And Ben complains about it. It's like like a cow would eat something like this. So Andy goes on and sees this woman that's working at the restaurant, and so no wait, so Ben goes on and notices this woman and asks if she knows the Knicks score so far, and the woman says, "Do you think I know the score of the Knicks game? Do I look like a B person that knows that answer?" And Ben is like, "Nope." And so Andy is to take this opportunity to all of a sudden randomly inject in this conversation and be like, well, yeah, I need to eat this vegetarian meal because my boyfriend thinks I'm fat. So Ben says to the woman, it's like, yeah, I don't think that she's fat, and the girl's like, yeah, whatever. Like, so it's just like, so she's doing this like public outburst, so that way Ben looks bad and also just very much annoys and irritates him. So so Andy leaves and then gets back to the back of this restaurant so that way she can watch this Knicks game, and she finds out that there is a missed point, and then she leaves. Andy and Ben make their way back to Ben's place and tries to get the coverage of the game. And as Ben watches the coverage, Andy mentions about how there's a thing that was missed by one of the players, and Ben points that out. It's like, wait a minute. The guy normally doesn't miss this shot, but you're saying that he missed it, and you knew about that ahead of time, huh? And so Andy tries to figure out a way that sounds reasonable for how like she actually did see the game, but didn't want to say that she had seen the game. So Annie distracts Ben by going on and getting to a point where they're possibly going to have sex. It seems, but Andy is to call uh, Ben's penis a nickname of Princess Sophia, and Ben is like, "Wait a minute, nah, that's not going to work. If anything, you need to go on and actually have a more masculine name, like Spike or Butch or Kroll the Warrior King," and 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 he's like, "What? What are those names?" And then as he rattles them off again and gets down to the Kroll the Warrior King thing, Andy starts to make fun of that, and then Ben realizes, like, you know what, like, I don't think I'm gonna be able to be in the mood to have sex tonight. So as Andy leaves, she tells Ben to take care of the fern, and Ben goes on and takes one of these teddy bears and just starts to just wrenches on it. And so as Andy leaves to get to the hotel or gets the elevator, uh, Ben runs to her and asks like, "Hey, are we gonna meet up tomorrow?" And Andy's like, "Really?" And Ben's like, "Yeah." And she's like, "Well, yeah, I hope so." And answer your phone. So now Ben is going through the thesaurus of any way that he can pitch diamonds in an interesting way. Uh, like going on and talk about stuff like glitters and all these other things that eventually I think one of them was to be some J Lo or uh, Mariah Carey movie or something. So eventually Ben can't think of any really good pitches for what he's going to use for this diamond thing because if anything, Andy's been working overtime to be just crazy and no longer the sexy fun girl that he met before. So and how she's evil. But if anything, the guys are telling him, "Hey, you only have a certain number of days. Like, just kind of keep it, just kind of keep it alive. Just keep it going." So, all of a sudden, out of nowhere, here is where Andy appears at Ben's work, goes on and delivers Ben this dog and names it Kroll. And so, as Ben looks at the dog, he doesn't even realize that it is a dog for how weird it is. And so Andy explains about how this is a Chinese dog and how it's a very unique pet, and it's also like most of it is pretty much hairless, anyways. So Annie is also coming with a gift for Ben, and it's to basically match the same kind of flannel uh, that she is wearing, as well as also that the dog is wearing. Uh, and it's kind of the same khaki color scheme. So Ben just throws the shirt over his shoulder because he already has a shirt, and Andy's like, "No, put the shirt on." So she puts on the shirt over the shirt that Ben is already wearing, which is weird. Because Ben before had taken his shirt off in the office, but now he just needs to put on a shirt over a shirt. Strange. So I guess he really just did not like the shirt or didn't care for it. That's why he's just like, yeah, I'm just gonna wear the shirt now, but as soon as you leave, I'm taking this off. So Ben now looks at the necklace of this dog after he has gone on to also pee on this pool table, and he says words like tinkle, 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 and all this kind of garbage. So because she's just being annoying. So Annie looks at the necklace and realizes how this dog has so many diamonds and so many bedazzled things upon his necklace. And so Annie says the word frosting, that, like, if anything, like the necklace deserves some kind of frosting. And Ben is like, frosting, you say? So Ben rushes to his pitch people and uses the word frost yourself. And Philip immediately likes the idea, and Philip is like is thrusting out of the window, frost yourself, everyone, and like, yeah, frost you. Philip was like, well, I like the idea. Let's go with it. So Ben is come to find out that he had gotten this idea from his new girlfriend. It's like, oh man, that girl is really working out. She's being your muse to give you this idea. So now we cut to Ben with this dog making his way back to Andy, and Andy has this weird family album that she springs on Ben. So Andy mentions about how this is like kind of very photoshopped and made up photos. And so Ben opens up this album and it's all a lot of Photoshop and a lot of like, hey, this is what our babies will look like, and they all look fugly. And Ben is like, well, yeah, our kids are gonna look very attractive. All of a sudden, Ben's mother is to call, and so Andy is to go on and take the phone from Ben, and eventually, like, both Andy and Ben's mother to kind of talk like they've already kind of met one another before and they've already spoken to one another. Ben finds that to be weird. It's like, wait a minute, did you just talk normally to my mom? And Andy's to reveal, it's like, oh yeah, I've already talked to your mother. That's how I got all these pictures. And so Andy's like, huh? Like, okay, that's a little strange. So here is where Ben goes on and makes his way to the bathroom, and he notices Vagisil's, and he notices that there's a whole medicine cabinet that has now changed. So, and he's all like, no, no, no. So great. So Ben now makes his way to Andy, and she has another surprise from him, and it's like another surprise. So Ben mentions how he wants to make his way to work because he has something going on, and so Andy's like, well, I have a surprise for you. It's tickets. And Ben is like, wait a minute, tickets? So Ben goes on and says, hey, I'll go and I'll have somebody cover for me. Where are we going? And so eventually we'll come to find that they're going to a Celine Dion concert. And Ben is just like, oh my God, it's like Celine Dion. Like he's just mortified after he's gone on through hours of Celine Dion. And we'd come to find that Andy's to be so excited. She's like, yeah, wow. So now we cut to Andy and the girls, and she's going on like, man, I really have to step up my game. Like, if anything, like what I'm doing is not working at this point. So eventually they come to the conclusion that Ben is gonna have a boys' night out, and Janine says like, well, hey, he always had this boys' night out set up without you present. Well, since you're now his boyfriend, how about you ruin his boys' night out? So the guys are all going on playing poker, smoking cigars, and having a good old time up until Andy arrives. Andy arrives with these cucumber sandwiches and gets rid of the pizza and forces the guys to have these cucumber sandwiches, but they all hate. So, also, Andy is to go on and want the guys to not smoke cigars. Eventually, brings in the dog in, where again the dog pees, and also Andy goes on and forces Ben to sneeze or blow his nose into her hand because she has this handkerchief or she has uh this Kleenex. So he does that. So all of a sudden here is where eventually Andy is to find out about the Fern, like, you let Fern die, and then she becomes more and more upset, so she runs off. So Ben, now finally showing how he's actually upset, goes on to be upset uh with Andy about like, well, where is the fun, sexy version of you? Not this uh like multi personality girl. Like where is the girl that I found to be so attractive before, and now like where is she gone to? So and also the one who wanted to be a much more serious journalist and not some one woman circus. So Annie goes into the elevator and leaves, and then Thayer and Tony go on and they talk to Ben and say, "Hey, man, we definitely want you to keep uh this whole diamond contract. So, man, you got to work shit out." So they go on, and Thayer comes up with the idea of couples therapy because he's done this in the past. So Ben runs off through all these fire escapes uh to meet up with Andy, and then say like, you know what, I'm sorry, and if anything, I wanna make this up for you. I think that we should probably go on and we should try couples therapy, and and Ben goes and says, yeah, I know, I have a friend up there who is to go on and have somebody who's gone through couples therapy, but Andy is to say, no, I have the perfect person that we can go on and go to couples therapy too. So the next thing we see is the following day where both Ben and Andy make their way to none other than Michelle, and she's being the therapist. So they ask how much the session is, and it's $300, and Ben's like, $300? Holy sh. So they go through this couples therapy, and eventually, like, we have Ben that goes on and starts to talk about how crazy that Andy has been becoming, and that at some point they also talk about the sex issue, how they haven't had sex yet, and um, we have Michelle that goes on and says, "Well, Ben, maybe you are to be more attractive to men," and then also as Michelle goes on and touches the hand of Ben, uh, Andy all of a sudden notices that Ben is flirting with this girl somewhat, and then Ben turns to Andy. It's like, well, hey, like, you guys had said I was gay. Now you're telling me that I'm hitting on this girl. Like, which is which? So by the end of all this, uh, Andy is to talk about how Ben had freaked out via phone call from Ben's mother, and Ben is like, I wasn't freaked out about that at all. Like, if anything, if you want to spend a whole getaway time with my family, by all means, let's go there. Let's meet with my family. And Michelle's like, you know what? That actually is a really good idea. And then Andy looks at Michelle's like, don't don't suggest that. So the next thing we see is both Ben and Andy driving off on this motorcycle to make their way to Ben's parents. So they make their way inside the house, and consistently there's a word of bullshit around the air. And Ben makes a joke about his family being uh, people who have Tourette's syndrome, but really they're going on and they're playing the card game bullshit, and so that's what this whole thing is. So so Ben goes on and takes a baby from his mother, and eventually they say that this is Joey Jr., and then he has to get his diaper cleaned, and Ben is walking off to get that diaper cleaned. Annie starts to make her way through the house and then finds that everybody's outside going on and playing BS. So Andy, who was never gonna play this card game before, has to get explained about the card game and then has to have her a part of it, as well as also getting to know certain people of this family. Like we have Uncle Arnie or uh, Uncle Arnold. It goes on and farts quite often, and it's kind of funny. So eventually we I think have Jack, who goes on and talks about how he has a couple of aces, and from from Annie's card, she knows that that's not true. She calls bullshit, and eventually, Jack is like, "All right, she got it. She figured it out." So all of a sudden, then Ben comes in, and he decides that he wants to take a round in of BS. So eventually, we come to find that Ben is really good at this card game, and if anything, he's at like the top of the leading board of being the best at this game. So at some point, Ben even has to mention that there's a star on the board next to Ben's name on it, like that means anything. But so the more and more that they play, we get to a point where we come to find out that people are starting to help out uh, Andy, so that way she can win at this game and be better than Andy. Eventually, Andy will start to, or let me. So Andy is getting tips from everybody so that she can beat Ben, and Ben starts to figure that out. And then gets upset with everybody, goes on and calls everybody a cheater, and if anything, the only way that Andy can beat him is clearly by cheating. So, and so Andy walks off. Shortly thereafter that, Andy and Ben, uh, they go on this motorcycle ride where Ben is going to teach Andy on how to use the motorcycle, and she starts driving. Ben falls off. He jumps back onto the motorcycle, and then he tries to get into a much more better control of having her being able to ride this, and so they are able to ride it. So Ben gets some ice cream or something like that. I'm not quite sure what this is because it's too far away to exactly tell. I think it's ice cream. So Ben and Andy are talking about how uh, they're talking about motorcycles. Ben mentions about how chicks really dig motorcycles, how he can park wherever he wants to, da 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 da. Like he doesn't really have to much deal with traffic. All of a sudden, there is to be this truck that comes out of nowhere that uh, that lands into this pothole that has water in it and goes splashing over them. And it's like, well, yeah, I guess there's one downside of uh, chicks really dig a guy that gets splashed with a whole lot of water. So the two of them go to the bathroom to kind of clean themselves off after getting splashed with water. They both go into the bathroom, and as Ben starts to get the shower ready, all of a sudden Andy starts to get emotional because she'd gone on to be with people that actually treated her like family, and Andy really felt emotional when Ben's mother was to have actually hugged him, and Ben is like, oh well, yeah, all right, like so. The two of them start hugging and kissing, and Ben also wants Andy to smile. So shortly thereafter that they're on a ferry together, and then Ben and Andy make their way back to Andy's place, and here's where Ben talks about the party that he wants Andy to come to as his girlfriend. She's like, "Oh, as your girlfriend?" And he's like, "Yeah, because you're my girlfriend." So they talk about how many close days it is to the whole 10th day thing, and Ben goes on and says, "Well, hey, like if anything, on the 13th day, we're gonna have Nick's tickets. It won't be as good as your tickets, but at least it'll be uh, tickets to go and see the game." So Annie goes on and hugs Ben, and it's to realize, like, I'm sure she has a real conundrum in her brain of like, man, like it seems like this relationship is really going somewhere, and now I've been basically pretending to be this person I'm really not, and yeah, like so, like, I'm sure she's very conflicted. So, here is where Andy goes to Laura and says that she can't does this article. And Laura's like, well, yeah, you can. You have a computer, right? You can do the article. Your computer is working? Do the article. So, Andy says that she's starting to get to know this guy, and Laura doesn't give a shit. Laura's like, hey, I'm not a Girl Scout. I'm not a, like, I'm not a this, I'm not a that. So, if anything, uh, all she cares about is that she's going to have space for this magazine, and so she starts talking about the magazine, about how she has this diamond ad that is going to give her some revenue, so for the entire year. So Laura is telling Andy to get this article done and to hand it in to her because Andy is a professional. So now we cut to Andy and Ben making their way to this party. The two of them see one another, and it's like, oh my god, you look beautiful. So do you. All right. So they make their way to the party, and so Thayer turns to Tony and says, yeah, that couples therapy really worked. So Ben goes on to explain to Andy that she can go over to these jewelers and get whatever she wants because they're handing out jewelry to all these women as long as they hand them back by the end of the night. And he goes on to tell her to frost herself. So Philip goes on and meets up with Laura, and so they start talking about the uh, how they were able to get all this jewelry here, and Philip goes on and talks about uh, the Deloras, how eventually Mrs. Delora was the one that wanted to put this all together and had control of Mr. Delora, so like that's how everything got done. So Andy makes her way to this bit of jewelry, and so a guy goes on and has this girl need to put on this very specific necklace and has it to be called the Isadora. So as there's a bit of weird conversation, well, weird, like because this guy's really laying it on thick. That's like, oh no, you deserve to have this necklace, and and goes on to like to take her hand and just like just kisses and like we even have Spears and Benny that's telling Ben, yeah, looks like you're gonna get competition. So while that's going on, we also have Ben that bumps into uh Miss Delora, and Miss Delora goes on and asks if Ben could order her a whiskey drink, and then she goes on and is starting to consistently talk to Ben, and kind of booping him on the nose. While this conversation is going on, Andy is watching it from the distance and kind of laughing. And Philip and the two girls are going on and watching on as Andy is just looking on at Ben from a distance, just kind of laughing here. So Philip is to immediately see that Andy has feelings for Ben, and so now Philip is to want to have the question answered of if Andy loves Ben. So he goes over, introduces himself to Andy, and then eventually starts to kind of push around the question. It's like, oh well, like it seems that you are to go on and be interested in my employee Ben here. So Ben talks about that all of these women are sparkling with these diamonds, but also could be sparkling in a different way because they may be in love. So Philip is to go on and say this because he feels that maybe Andy is to also be feeling the same way because that's what it kind of comes off. And so Andy's to say, it's like, well, I've only been knowing this guy for 10 days. And Philip is like, well, Ben is a lucky man. I could tell. There's something just the way you're talking about me. Like, I could just feel that you love this guy. So as Philip walks away, Andy says, don't tell Ben. That's how I feel. So Ben meets up with the two friends, and Philip comes in and says, yeah, you're the one doing the pitch. You've won. You've won the bet. She loves you. So Ben is all excited. So now all of a sudden, here's where Ben meets up with Laura, and here's where eventually also the two Spears and Benny girls are to make their way to Thayer and Tony and explain about how supposedly Andy was to know about the whole bet the whole time, and Thayer and Andy, or Thayer and Tony, go on to rush to Andy to say like, "Oh yeah, just pretend that you're in love. Just say everything that the guy wants to hear." Um, Even though Andy has kind of already done that, but also It's just Andy finding out that the whole thing was just a bet, and she was just so upset about it. So, and you could just tell that she's just kind of defeated and just distraught. She's just like, oh, after she finds out this whole thing was a bet. So, so while Andy is being told about all this, we then also have Ben that's getting told through Laura about the article that Laura is doing about how to lose a guy in 10 days, and that this girl had gone on to nickname this guy's penis, and then she's like, oh, wait, you're the guy, aren't you? And Ben is like, and Laura's like, oh my God. So, so Annie goes up on the stage after it's announced that there is to be a very specific musician known as Marvin Hamlich that is making his way to the stage. So Annie goes on to get to the microphone and starts speaking onto the stage and starts talking about Ben. And so Andy is to speak that Ben is going to come up quickly to do his own song, and then as Ben gets to the stage, he then goes on and is to have Andy come back on the stage because they're going to be playing a duet. And Ben forces Tony and Thayer uh, to grab Andy before she leaves. So they go on and they do this duet, and so Ben turns to Marvin and asks if he can do the song "You're So Vain." So he's like, "Well, that's not normally my song." He's like, "I don't care, just figure it out." So they start playing the song, and at first it's actually to be the song, and then they start changing the words. They eventually change the words to what two of them have been going through. They go on and they do the whole like you made me miss the big game, and go on to mention all the things that they've gone on through, and honest like I don't want to throw any crap on a person that probably can't sing, so probably shouldn't be saying this anyways. Um, but like it's very obvious that a certain person can't really sing in this part of this thing, but whatever. Um, I guess like they probably didn't hire her for her singing talent, but anyways, so the further and further this song goes along, and eventually at some point, uh, Annie does leave and walks off, and Ben chases after her. So the two of them starts throwing back and forth the fact that they did this magazine article and that they did this bet. Back and forth they go, and so Annie goes on to say to, which is a really really good point here, that Ben was to be driven insane all because of a magazine article, and Andy says like, well, you told a number of people that you could fall in love with me, and so eventually, the further and further along this back and forth goes, that eventually all this girl was to Ben is just some random girl that he could pick up at a bar, and And Ben is like, well, hey, I was just some guy that you could just use for one of your stories. So Ben tells Andy that if her whole article is how to lose a guy in 10 days, she's accomplished that task and he's dumping her. And so he leaves and walks off. And Andy's like, well, I never lost anything that I never really had because I never really had you. So now we cut back to Andy, who's with Laura, handing in her article. And Laura says, this is not what I expected. It's even better than I expected. And actually, she nailed it within the 10 days perfectly. So, congratulations. So, as Laura goes on and is to kind of be very praising of Andy, the only problem is that Andy realizes that she still can't go on and write whatever she wants. That if anything, still there's still restrictions because Laura's like, well, you can't still just write politics or anything that you want to. If anything, you still have to go on and still write about fashions or eye surgeries or any number of things. And so Andy is to finally just say, okay, like, well, then, like, thank you for the opportunity, but I think I'm kind of done here because Andy finally wants to go on and stretch her wings and kind of do all kinds of stories. And this how-to thing is really just not fun for her anymore. Plus, also with that last story about how she really had to go on and really be this evil person and really have this kind of whole like heart ripped out of her uh, with everything that kind of went on by that last bit of story there. So now we cut to Ben. Uh, Ben is not exactly proud about what it all happened, but ultimately he is to still get this diamond contract, and I guess if anything, I guess that's to be like the one good thing that he got out of everything, or out of this whole deal, this whole bet that he made. So and so as Ben is going on and talking this all out, he's realizing that the only person that he's talking to is Krull, the dog, and that was a bit of funny thing going on there. So so Ben realizes that he is to have tickets for the Knicks game, and who is he gonna bring to the Knicks game but this dog? So so Michelle and Andy are watching the Knicks game, and all of a sudden, Michelle is to hear a knock on the door, and it's another the Mike wanting to come back to meet up with Michelle and want to get their her perfume smell back on his pillow. So Michelle is so happy, goes on and is to grab onto Mike, kiss him, and Andy is to be so happy for her friend that this relationship worked out. So now Ben is going on and watching as um, as Mrs. Lauer is doing this advertisement for the whole Frost Yourself campaign, and we have Tony that is having this Composure magazine uh, to haunt Ben with it, to basically keep telling him, hey, yeah, you need to read this article. And Ben's like, no, I have no interest in reading that. So Tony starts to throw starts to thrust through the magazine himself, and he starts reading the magazine that Ben won't read. So Tony mentions that the out of the article that he reads, the biggest mistake of it all was the fact that this girl did really like the guy that she was trying to lose in 10 days. And eventually, after Ben hears that, he does start to read through the whole article and then runs after to find Andy. So Ben makes his way to Andy's work to find out that she's no longer there, that she's going to Washington, and so all of a sudden Ben bumps into Michelle. It's like, wait a minute, you're the therapist, and you're not really a therapist, are you? And she's like, nope. And he's like, well, you owe me $300. So Ben rides off with the Fern on his motorcycle to chase after Andy that's getting on this taxi cab. As Ben finds the taxi cab, he tells Andy to pull over, and at some point Andy pretends that she's going to throw up, forcing the cab to then pull over. So Ben thrusts the magazine in front of Andy's face, asking whether or not if this was true or just a thing to sell magazines. And Andy explains how it was true. And so Ben now asks, okay, what are you doing? And Andy's like, what do you think I'm doing? I'm going to Washington. I have an interview. He's like, well, yeah, I know that, but you can do your job anywhere. You don't have to specifically do it in Washington. So, but Andy is to say, it's like, well, but Washington will allow me to write whatever I want to write. It's like, well, yeah, but you can write anywhere. You don't have to specifically write at Washington. So, Andy goes on and says, like, well, hey, why don't you save your mind games for the next bet? And then she starts to walk back to the cab. So Ben says, you know what, you're running away. And if you're not running away, I call bullshit on that. So the two of them get so close, they hug. Ben goes on and gives the taxi cab some money for him to go back to drop off all the luggage. And that Andy is going to go with Ben on his motorcycle because he is calling Andy's bluff. The two of them kiss, and then they go on and they talk about the Fern, and then we roll credits. Thank God, because woo, I'm getting a little bit tired, and then also I hope that this is going to be an extra video on top of what I'm already doing. So hopefully, after I get some sleep, I'll get some more videos out. I know that this is not on the beaten path of everything that I've done so far on this channel. A lot of people find this to be very weird that I'm going to be putting this up, uploading it, whatever. But I wanted to try to be more diverse in the channel, and the videos that I'm kind of putting out lately are stuff that I hope are going to be real bigger things for the channel, I hope. How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days also was to be a thing that I'd find out from Matthew McConaughey, was honestly to be one of his bigger movies. So that's honestly kind of why I did this, because I hope that I somehow benefit from finding that bit of knowledge through that Matthew McConaughey interview. So I thought really that was my best choice, to just find a thing that is really popular and try to do it, because I always want to be honest with people. Like, I don't want to go on and I don't want to say that that I didn't like this movie when I really did. So it was an easy choice anyways, but also to find out that Matthew McConaughey seems to have consistent bits of success with this film, like it's kind of hard to argue. Like, well, hey, how about I just try my hand in this and gamble on this and see if it pans out. But also to realize that this could be a very hard sell because I don't think I really said much about the grading this movie. Like, I'll say that How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days. Um, I'll say it's a. I'll say it's a. I'll say that it's an okay piece. Um, I'll probably even go into maybe. No, I'll say it's an okay piece. There's a lot of it that is honestly annoying, but at least I'll go on to say that this movie is interesting enough for people to check out. I will thumbs it up. Um, I wish I probably could have gone on and said something of grading of this much earlier, but there's a lot of times lately where I go on and I do these reviews and I completely forget about the grading system. Or honestly, I'm just like, you know what? Like, unless I really hate something or am to really like something, that's when I think I'll go on and I'll actually toss in the actual grading right away. Because otherwise, it's just like, hey, like, I would recommend people checking this out at least. So if anything, that's why I'm uploading it. Um, Plus, also, I'm hoping that this is gonna do well, but who knows? If anything, also, kind of having me do this one, it's kind of very random for the channel because nothing is to match up of anything that I've done before on this channel to this specifically. But whatever, I'm just taking a chance. I'm just doing this random bit of thing and hoping that it's going to pay out later. Uh, if anything, also, even the things that I thought were going to kind of be really big for the channel haven't really shown any real fruit yet, but it's also kind of a slow momentum of certain things. It's also fairly early for certain projects, also because they've only been on this channel for a very brief amount of time. So anything could happen still. I'm trying to be as much optimistic. I'm not to be quite frustrated yet. Well, I probably said I've kind of been frustrated in one video, but like if anything, uh, like I'm to kind of throw everything of caution in the wind, the kitchen sink and everything, and uh, and hope that if I just work hard enough, that um, that this will all pay out in the end or something. Um, but I'm not quite sure how I'll be able to consistently keep the momentum going. But again, I hope that I'll just find the right movie, show, something out there that'll do amazing numbers. Is what I'm hoping for. Um, there have been a lot of shocking times in the past where I've gone on to do reviews where uh, things do incredible numbers, and I'm like, wow, like I didn't think that this would be the project that did that. But also considering I've kind of done these projects in the past, a lot of them, um, it's kind of hard to see if anybody will care about them again, or even doing something like How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days. Like, I've never done this project before. Like, I have no idea how to measure how successful this is going to be. Um, and I'm definitely not doing this out of prior success of something that I've done on another channel. This one is just a new thing, and I'm just like, man, let's see if this works out. Uh, but either way, like I'm just hoping for the best, and still trying to figure out very big, interesting titles to bring to the channel. Like I've really gone on and done a lot of complex stuff lately, and realized what a mistake that is. Because either they don't really do very well, or I just kind of I'm just like, man, what if I could have gone on and done something else instead of that? Which was less taxing, which was less like by the end of it all. For for how I had to go on and talk so quickly, try to get this all rushingly done, and also realize that uh, that it's like I'm still hoping and praying that some of the projects are going to show some fruit in the future, and they're not all going to die at some point, um, because I have to keep a momentum going. But anyways, all this will be moot point. No one will check out this whole entire video, which is fine, um, because at least I can be happy about getting all these done and all these accomplished. And like, man, I also feel like this channel is a lot more better, well-rounded than the other channel was. Because I think in the other channel, I would go on to stick to so many of these kind of things over and over and over again, and it got to a point where I had no idea where to go with the other channel. So it was good that I came here because I'm mixing in these newer projects like this one with a lot of the older ones, um, as well as also even bringing back things that are viewed onto the other channel and bringing them here. Because I'm just like, why the heck not? If anything, uh, some videos are actually doing way better now over here with a different thumbnail or different this or different that. Like obviously, like Supergirl is doing way better. Um, I'm hoping that other projects in the future are going to continue to do even way better than I thought they would. So I don't know. Like if anything, uh, I can be very optimistic, very hopeful, but also I just gotta keep piping away or chiming away at it. I gotta keep um figuring out like the best projects to cover next. So I'm gonna get out of here so I can cover some sleep because I need that. And then when I wake up, I'll continue to keep doing some projects. I think that this will probably end up just being uploaded now or right after I can upload it. So I'll have a video for today, and then I'll sleep, and then I'll do the next video that was gonna go on for today. Um, but there's sometimes where I kind of can't even remember or keep straight the days anymore because it just kind of bleeds uh, into almost doing this like every other day. So it's kind of hard to keep track like what all I hadn't done on. Yeah, it's very confusing. Um, it's also really good how I feel like I've gone on to have a certain set of movies that I think I'm going to soon all execute. So that'll be great to have that all kind of be set up to all get knocked down and feel, if nothing else, that I can feel accomplished with getting some of these bigger titles out very early to where I can just kind of rest on those bigger titles and then kind of wait for them to eventually do something. Um, and then kind of get to like, okay, what could be the next bigger project that I've never gone on to do in the channel, and hope that they can go on and and progress or show something. So I'm gonna get out of here. This is rambling. I'm also severely tired. So goodbye, everybody. Bye, everybody.